And hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Coffee Kegs in Creeksville. I am your host as well as the Chief Justice of Ile de Liberte, which you see here on the screen. Actually, you don't see it on the screen because I'm not sharing it with you. But just so you know, I am here to judge the performance of all the players in this campaign, which I ran, and we will talk about everything that happened. But at this point in time, court is in session. Prepare to be judged. All right. Let's talk about this campaign and the inspiration for it and what was going on the whole time I was doing this. So here we have a map of, as you can see, Haiti. And anybody who has been following the news in recent weeks knows that there's been a lot of unrest there, which tends to happen, unfortunately, in that part of the world, Haiti in particular. The nation is poorly developed because, after all, it was colonized by the Europeans who proceeded to take away much of the wealth from the island. The island did gain its independence when you had a slave uprising, but then the French were quite cruel in how they dealt with Haiti in the aftermath, forcing the nation of Haiti to pay reparations for its own liberation, which is pretty rough. It would be nice if someday that were reversed and we saw some justice, but it doesn't appear that that's going to happen anytime soon. In the meantime, I did not want to run an event about Haiti per se. Instead, I wanted it to be about the kind of inspired by Haiti. So I created a fictional country called Ile de Liberte. And the Island of Liberty, or Liberty Island, whatever you want to call it, is, of course, based on Haiti. We used the map. We did not use the politics or the people or anything else. We simply used the map as a rational Caribbean backdrop for the campaign. I had considered Cuba, but Cuba was too large. Jamaica was a little too small. I wanted something slightly bigger. And then Puerto Rico, even smaller than Jamaica, or at least pretty close. But Haiti was just kind of right in terms of size. I also liked the fact that it was easily dividable into a few different regions. You have the Southern Peninsula, you have the central area, which is surrounded by mountains. So you have a central valley where Port-au-Prince is located, and then you have another little valley here. And then, of course, you have this northern portion. So all of it just kind of worked out. The geography was perfect for a campaign game, and that was what we did. So we're going to talk about Ile de Liberte and all of that stuff shortly. We designed a flag for Ile de Liberte. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I will present that to you. And in fact, the most illustrious president from Ile de Liberte is actually showing his flag, or a portion of the flag. I'll show you what the whole flag looks like. I actually think it's kind of cool. Here we are. And I just think that's a really cool flag. I made it myself with some design inspiration in coordination with Mr. President, who happens to be on here. And it represents, obviously, I think the symbology should be pretty obvious, so I'm not going to get into it, but pretty cool flag. And anybody who really digs the flag, well, I have, in fact, created a mug. I guess this here represents the commercial portion of the podcast. Let's see here. Let's do this. And here's the Ile de Liberty Office of the President mug, Justice and Prosperity for All. And it's just kind of a cool mug to have on your table. Where did you get it? Did you get it when you were elected president? Did you get it when you visited the presidential palace? Who knows? Maybe it fell off a truck, but now you have it. It's yours here for the low price of $21 US, mind you. We accept American cash in our store. All right, that's enough of that. let's talk about the game and how it went down, and let's talk about who won, who lost, and so on. And let's get into it. So let's see here. We have here most legitimate President Adid. And Mr. President, would you like to say hello and say a few words to everyone before we go over the results?
Hey guys, you guys know me as Zendos. I was playing a Deed in this game. I have to say that it is very much American propaganda that you are using only American dollars, because I cannot buy that, unfortunately. I would have it. I'm very legitimate. Also, I won this game, definitely.
Well, of course, Mr. President. Don't you worry about that, and don't you worry about the mug. We'll talk about that after the show. But we'll get you squared away. You're going to have one of these soon. So let's talk about the event. And here is the Discord. Actually, I ought to pull it up on this other screen. I'm going to pull it up over here. So we are going to present on our... I'm still kind of getting used to how Discord works. I mean, not Discord, but here we are, StreamYard. So, but here it is. Here is StreamYard, and here's our national news channel. And we'll just scroll up here real quick, and we'll just take a look at it. And we started in early April, and we ran pretty much in real time through the campaign for about 2.5, 3 weeks, which is about what I expected it to run. And we basically created news. The players created news. We had the United States. We had Russia involved. We also had various factions within Ile de Liberte. And those factions you can see here on the left side of the screen. We had the United States. We had Russia. We had the hotel, or the president. So we had the president. We had a presidential cabinet. And then, of course, we had a police force. We had a military. And then we had the old and the new elites. And so these were very wealthy people who were involved in the government, and they were pursuing their own private interests. The old elites tended to be pro-Russia. The new elites tended to be pro-US. And then, of course, we had 4 different gangs: La Bande Rouge, the Family Neufroy, or whatever. Let's see here. We had them. We had the Infants du Sieur, I think the children of Sieur, meaning referring to the revolutionary, the 19th century revolutionary, and the family of Doniers, I guess. I imagine it's the dock workers, so it's kind of a dock workers gang, a gang that controls the docks and the warehouses and so on. So that's what we have here. I allowed each of them to choose their starting points, the different gangs. And what was really cool about that was, if I can pull up my window here, my map, here we are, is we had some cleverness going on. In particular, the family, I'm just going to call them that, decided to set up in Cape Haitian or Haiti, Cape Haiti, whatever. But they wanted to set up here outside in the north, where there wasn't a whole lot going on. They thought that if they set up down here, they would be caught up in the turbulent times of Port-au-Prince. But by setting up here, they had hoped to operate in relative tranquility and peace. They expected to be left alone. I dealt with that, of course. So let's talk briefly about what challenges each of the players were given by myself as umpire, and which ones they just kind of naturally had to deal with. The United States, we'll start with the United States. The United States, the problem for them was simply that a lot of drugs and human trafficking and crime were flowing through IDL, which is short for Ile de Liberte, and into the United States. Specifically, there was a drug route that was going from South America to IDL, then over to Puerto Rico, and then from Puerto Rico to the United States. Now, I imagine drug routes work somewhat like this in real life, in that there's multiple stops along the way, and they might go to different nations. I actually am not an expert on this, so I can't tell you that this is precisely how they went. Nonetheless, the United States was concerned with all of these drugs and other things coming in. Naturally, from a metagame perspective, they know that IDL is involved in the trafficking and stuff that's coming in somehow, but they don't know specifically what was going on. So we started off by telling them that there is, of course, criminal activity going on and that IDL is somehow involved. And so the president, of course, dispatches the Coast Guard and the United States Navy to kind of intercept these trafficking shipments and deal with everything. What a normal president would be. Now, President Gray, played by Eli, is conservative. He's a conservative president, sort of an isolationist, not really interested in getting involved in foreign affairs. Nonetheless, he finds himself being drawn into the quagmire in IDL as the game progresses. Meanwhile, let's go to Russia. In Russia, you have a relatively weak position. You have an ambassador rather than the president, and the ambassador is just trying to influence the domestic situation in IDL to favor Russia. They're trying to kind of reclaim their old glory in the area. But there's not a lot to offer there, at least not yet. There will be in a moment, but there's not a lot to offer at the start of the game. Meanwhile, because this is set in the real world in real time, Russia has a war going on in Ukraine, so they're very distracted. Their resources are depleted. Their military resources are depleted. They don't have a lot to bring to the table, and they have to kind of make things work with what they have. All right, we'll talk about the president. And since the president is here, I'm going to let him speak for himself. Mr. President, what do you think was your challenge, or what were your challenges in this particular event in this game?
Well, let's begin with the fact that as I was reading through the document that was provided to us as a guide, I realized that Edith although he has a strong influence among the people and the military, a consistent crime and the police being corrupt are reducing that kind of power. So I believe my challenge was really to try and keep the name of Edith to be kind of like that household name in the island, and establish a dynasty, as I was going to eventually push my dictatorship kind of far, but the game didn't get to that. And I believe that a lot of my challenges were the fact that my subordinates, especially in the military and the police and the elites, were all scheming against me. So I had to be very quick in analyzing their objectives, utilizing the intelligence services that I had at my hand. Those were really my challenges, in my opinion.
All right, I think that's an excellent assessment of what you have going on. You clearly did not trust the people underneath you, which you weren't supposed to. So I think, again, you read the situation correctly. Meanwhile, you had proper presidential ambitions. So I think you get an A on your report card. In that regard, you did very well reading the room, if you will, and dealing with it appropriately. All right, let's go back to this. Okay, so let's talk about what I did to kind of mess things up for the players. And if I pull up my map again, one of the problems was that the gangs didn't seem to want to fight. And you need some sort of a catalyst to kick things off. So I did a couple things. The first thing is I arranged for a gang shooting at a nightclub in here, and I actually selected a literal nightclub here in the city. And I actually don't know how much of a nightclub it was, but it was good enough for our purposes. If you see me looking over here, I'm looking at the map on my screen, on my other screen, but there was a shooting. Two gangsters, common love interest, one pulls out a pistol, and there's a very brief gun battle, and a couple people are wounded. And the idea was to start a conflict between two of the gangs in the region. That didn't seem to go anywhere. Meanwhile, the gangs were like, hey, let's unite, let's cooperate, let's work together against our common enemy, which is the government, which we absolutely don't want, right? Because the gangs are supposed to be fighting each other. That's what gangs do. So I had to kind of, throw in a catalyst. But that catalyst alone was not enough. The elites were kind of doing their own thing. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. So I needed to really stir the pot. And the way to stir the pot was I came up here to the north, where I had a very clever player, Gen TJ9, who is extremely clever. Gen T, as we call him. Gen T is a very clever, intelligent player. But of course, there's not much you can do in a conflict versus the gods of Kriegspiel, right? So I just decided, guess what? We're going to find a lithium deposit that is worth the nation's entire GDP, which is 20 billion. And we're just going to put it right next to Cape Haitian. And so I did so. Now, I had to do some research on lithium and how lithium deposits work and so on. And I really could not find a suitable location to put one in Haiti. So I just kind of picked one, and we just figured it's a MacGuffin. We're going to fight over it. We're not going to worry about the science of it. So I put one near Cape Haitian, Cap Haitian, and that was it. So I basically painted a big target on Gen T, and that forced him to kind of scramble and run for cover, because now he has to play smart. Now he has to figure the government's coming, the other gangs are coming, the other governments, United States and Russia, are probably taking a look at this area. And this is a region that's under my direct control and influence. How do I deal with this? At first, he sent gangsters to basically occupy the land where the lithium reserve was located. And I can't remember if he ordered this personally. I think he did. But even if not, well, I had his captains, his subordinates, do it anyway, because I wanted his fingerprints all over that site. And of course, when the military finally said, we're going to go and occupy this, is something that the military did very late in the game. They didn't move on this as quickly as they should have. Maybe they were waiting for an order from the president. I don't know. But they moved slowly. They dragged their feet to get there, along with the police. And when they moved in, then Gen P was like, we got to get out of here. Let's shoot a couple of guys. We're going to sacrifice them, and they'll find the bodies, and we're going to disappear. And the idea was that, hey, my subordinates moved in here without orders or directions or permission from me. I am punishing them. Here is the punishment. You're going to find it in the form of these two guys, and we are going to stay out of your way. And so that was kind of Gen T's strategy, was we're going to stay out of the way. We're going to lie low. The other problem that he ran into was that his drug shipments were in fact being intercepted, and legitimately so, by the United States. But we'll talk about that in a moment. The idea, though, was when I introduced the lithium, everything just started popping. That was just the catalyst we needed to get the game rolling, because now everybody has an interest. The United States does not need the lithium. They're like the least hungry of all the nations. Yet at the same time, they're being drawn towards it because of the crime that's coming out of Cap Haitian. Meanwhile, Russia would like to get a hold of it, but their position is weak. So they're like, well, we can offer you a little bit of money, and we can offer you weapons and other things. We've got some aircraft we can offer you. Not that IDL needs an air force. They have 4 airplanes in their air force, but, hey, what do you know? It's prestige, right? So Russia didn't have a whole lot to work with or to offer. And so here they are trying to do the best they can. But at the same time, America is being drawn into the island. Meanwhile, the gangs are like, well, we're supposed to be fighting each other, but we're not going to fight each other. We don't want to fight each other. We kind of want to unite against the government, but we don't know what to do with ourselves or how to fight them. So I invented a character who I called Lord Archangel, obviously a straight up ploy on Lord of War with Nicolas Cage. So this Nicolas Cage looking guy is going around and offering to sell weapons to everybody, the military, the gangs, and so on. And he gets a few customers, but the customers are like, oh, we'll just buy some bullets or some bulletproof vests, whatever, here and there. So in order to really amp things up, he starts to give things away. In particular, in Cap Haitian, he gives away an armored vehicle for free. And Gentil is like, what is this? Send a couple guys to the warehouse and find out what's going on. Oh, guess what? You have a free armored vehicle. And the idea is it's in his interest as an arms supplier to get everybody on the island fighting each other, because then everybody on the island is buying his weapons, including the military, perhaps. And when the military doesn't bite, that's when he turns to the gangs and says, why don't I give you some upgraded equipment while I make this available to you? So the military has to get desperate and has to buy weapons in order to compete with you. Otherwise, you're actually going to outgun the military potentially, at least in your own local area. And that was the idea. Meanwhile, the gangs themselves were just kind of like, what do we do with ourselves? And to make things even more interesting, enter the communists. Now, the communists were a very strong contender for winner of the game. And that's because the communists basically start as a student-led organization at the National University. They've got nothing going on. They just have this little club. And at first they go out and they give some speeches and try to hand out some pamphlets, and it just falls flat, right? But then there's problems down at the docks. So they send some students to the docks to talk to the dock workers, and boom, that was exactly the right move they needed to make. And I gave them purchase with the dock workers, which means they begin to gain influence, power, and control there. And pretty soon, the next thing you know, they're actually putting a candidate up for union election among the dock workers and the construction union. So they're moving on. They get noticed by another NPC, which is a non-player character, which is another way of saying me, by China. There's actually a Chinese embassy in Haiti. So I'm able to use this and say there's a Chinese embassy in IDL. And they get a hold of the player who is running the communists, who here is named Carmelo. But the player is actually TS14. And TS14 meets with the Chinese, and the Chinese begin supporting him actively, providing him with resources and things that he needs. This, of course, makes the communists an issue, because the communists are actually plowing a very right field. Like, the people of the island are very open to them once they actually hear what they represent and what they do. Of course, it's getting past that initial start. So the communists need a long game. They need a game that runs at least 3 or 4 months to really get up there and win. Unfortunately, the game comes to an end long before that. But I want to say the communists were some serious contenders for the game and for making progress. And I was very pleased and proud of how TS14 played the communists. So let's take a look here. And yeah, the Chinese, the protests and everything, they just played it very, very well. I gave him this instance where he had a conversation with one of the gangs, and the Chinese are like, well, we know that you talked to one of the gangs. What was the discussion about? Tell us the truth. And this was a test, because what TS14 didn't know is that the Chinese were actively tapping his phone conversations and knew everything. And had he lied, he would have at a minimum had reduced or been cut off by the Chinese, which would have put the game out of reach. He wisely, however, said, I'm going to go ahead and tell the truth. He did so, and the Chinese were like, okay, look, here's how to play this. And they agreed to give him full support. What people don't know is that the Chinese had told him pick 60 persons, or it was 60 or 30, I can't remember, maybe it was 30. And we're going to send them to China for 6 weeks. And we're going to train them as a revolutionary cadre. And when they come back, we're going to supply them with arms, and they're going to be steeped in the theory, they're going to be armed, they're going to be supported, and then the communist revolution will begin. And boom, these guys would have won if the game had continued, I think, but it did not. But I really think that given even the level of success and even the short timeline, very strong contender. So if not first place, definitely probably second place, I would say. All right, let's talk about some of the others. President Adid had issues with the military and the police. President Adid, can you talk to us about your struggles with the police?
Well, that's a very long story to begin with. Let's just say that Sam is the kind of guy who you can expect to have these problems with. And he was playing as the head of the police, naturally.
Right, Sam Miller. Yep, Sam Miller.
Yep. So I had a few problems to start with. And that was, first of all, assuring his loyalty. I believe that Sam is probably one of the biggest wild cards in these games, especially. So my first thought was, can I trust him? And I think that was the biggest problem at the start. When I figured out that there was a 50-50 chance that he might be loyal, but that he also might be scheming, my second biggest problem turned to the fact the police was being extremely corrupt, and that was allowing the gangs to do what they wanted to do. I wasn't really happy with that, and I was hoping that Sam would begin this kind of anti-corruption department, which he did. However, he was being very inactive with my personal orders. Like I was telling him, go after the lithium deposit, as you mentioned previously. But everyone decided to just become 60-year-old men for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't get my hands on it early on. Otherwise, I would have been getting offers from everybody. And unironically, had they secured it early on, I most probably would have been able to get my hands on one of the offers I got, which was Tusks. I think you're going to talk about him later.
Leon Tusk. Yeah, we'll talk about Leon Tusk. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had offered me quite a big amount of cash, which I could have used to buy the weapons that Archangel offered, and that would have just strengthened the military a lot. And I think that was primarily the biggest issue I had with the police.
All right, fair enough. What you might not have known was that Sam Miller he was kind of lukewarm in terms of loyalty. He floated around. He was having a lot of conversations with the gangs. And eventually these conversations turned into, let's overthrow the government and I'll be in charge, which is pretty typical for Sam to do. And it just didn't quite work out for him. He ends up kind of declaring war on the gangs. And he does this big, huge day of roundups and arrests. So he goes out and he starts arresting all of these gangsters. And the gangsters are basically like, okay, we're going to declare war on the police. We're going to show them a lesson. And so then it's on. And so now you have the national police who are fighting all of the gangs at the same time. Miller is talking to the president. He's talking to the Russians. He's wanting to kind of do a coup and take control. And he's really in over his head is the problem. And the issue is he doesn't recognize that he's in over his head. So he keeps doubling down. And I don't know what to tell the guy.
That's Sam for you.
Yeah, that's Sam Miller for you. Okay, so we'll talk about what happens with Sam momentarily. Now, you mentioned Leon Tusk. Now, Leon Tusk was, let's see here, Lagarde is trying to join. He was one of the elites, or actually, he was a cabinet member, but his devices are not connected, so I can't add him to the stream. So, Lagarde, check your connections. Anyway, let's talk about Tusk. Okay, so Leon Tusk, which is actually really Elon Musk, right? The founder of Edison, not Tesla, electric cars, wants that lithium because lithium is used to make batteries, and it would be great for him. So I decide let's just kind of stir things up and see what most legitimate President Adid will do. And so I send Leon Tusk as an NPC to go talk to him. And he's just a jerk, just a complete jerk. He just goes in, no social skills, no finesse. He's like, look, I'm going to offer you 20 billion right now, take it or leave it. And Adib is like, I kind of want to weigh my options, and we don't really need. Well, why don't you tell me, Adib, since you're here, about your experience with Leon Tusk.
This guy immediately started just throwing around a bunch of cash, and I knew this was nothing for him based on who he was. And I was like, his offer is good because I have like several options I could go with. Like, for example, if I took his offer, I could start using it to buy weapons. Now, don't forget that he was offering me 500 million for the next 20 years. This guy was literally stacking the government with money, but I was getting other offers as well. And I had to think very clearly about what I wanted here, whether it was foreign aid or money to secure my reign for the next 20 years. And I made a mistake, I believe, in this meeting, which was to reject his offer. I should have taken it immediately because it would have seriously just changed everything. The police wouldn't have been encouraged to go and side with Sam because I would have had the money to just pay them all off. And the military would have almost certainly not gone against me. And Tordu probably would have gotten killed if he tried to go for a military dictatorship. I was effectively assuring my reign had I taken his offer, and I was going to right as the game was ending. However, I wasn't allowed the chance to.
Yeah.
And
so Tusk basically leaves. Actually, you detain him at the airport.
Yeah.
He's such a jerk, but you want to kind of get the last word. He complains to the President of the United States. He complains to your cabinet, to Lagarde, and eventually you release him. But, had you called him and said, all right, I'll take your offer, he probably would have accepted. But the whole point of this was just to create some chaos and see what you did. And had you taken the money, you're right. I think it would have changed the game entirely, because then you would have had the money to buy the resources to crack down on the gains and establish your reign and your rule. But I made him rather distasteful. And so it was very hard for you. So being prideful, especially as president, being disrespected, and yet here is this sweetheart deal where if you take it, then all your dreams come true. It's hard to do. Yeah, you fell for the bait. So, but that was on purpose. I just wanted to give you a roller coaster ride there. I didn't want it to be too easy on you. So
yeah,
there
was fair.
There was that. Okay, let's take a look now at the military real quick. The military was largely loyal, but I think there were some rumblings, especially from Tordu. He ultimately decided to be loyal, but he had schemed a little bit. He had dabbled in scheming. He had kind of seriously given it some thought, but it never would have worked. If the President Adid had come from the military, he was basically a military dictator, just president officially. And the military was by and large loyal to him. So had Tordu decided to betray the president, he probably would have been ultimately eliminated or arrested by his own subordinates. Yeah. Nonetheless,
I think that...
go ahead.
No, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I think that he made the right choice because, as I was telling him throughout the game, that I was basically trying to just groom him into becoming my heir and just eventually secure that position for him. So I think he made the right choice in the end.
Yeah, I think he did too. So he did all right. So yeah, I gave him quite a decent order of battle and so on. And then he met with Lord Archangel, and Lord Archangel wasn't quite sure what to do, was going to sell it to him. He actually kind of dove into this. He separated out the army into formations and reserves and everything. So he had the army essentially ready to go with rules of engagement and other stuff. But ultimately, when they were deployed, he made a pretty big blunder. Tordu is probably not the bottom of the list, but he's definitely at the bottom of the list because he made a pretty serious blunder in the late game, which we'll talk about momentarily. All right, let's talk about the games real quick. La Bande Rouge, which was Pascal Picnic Barden, and the name Picnic. I gave myself the name Picnic when I played a game recently, and that's because in Haiti, in real life, the guy is named Barbecue. The big gangster on the island of Haiti in real life, his nickname's Barbecue. So I played some game, and I can't even remember what the heck I did, but I told everybody, you've heard of Barbecue, well, I'm a whole picnic. And of course, Pascal here picks it up as his name. It was actually Carolingian is the real name of the player. Well, the real Discord name, I should say. And I just thought it was amusing. I thought it was great. He came up with some lore and everything for his character, and he did okay, you know. Let's see here. I think it was his gang that was caught up in the gang shooting at the nightclub, and it was his gang that was closely in competition with the dock workers. So we have that going on. I see Pablo, who is one of our gang leaders, is in the chat. And I don't know if you can join, but it would be great if you were here on the live stream. All right. The family Nourois. I can't pronounce my French.
It's neuf rois. It means 9 kings.
Oh, the family of the 9 kings. Well, there you go. What do I know? Zindos, I think, speaks French, so this is the perfect realm for him. Yeah, this was the gang that was out of the way in the north, Gen TJ9, and we've already kind of talked about him. Didn't win, although I think they played very well. Definitely an honorable mention, but they did play very well.
Yeah, Pablo can't join, by the way.
He can't join?
Yeah, he's talking from YouTube. That's why.
Oh, okay. No worries. That's okay. Well, hang out here because I'm going to talk about you pretty soon. Okay, so the Infants Discure, perhaps one of the lesser active gangs, I think, or am I wrong? No, that's Pablo. No, I'm right. He's actually very active. Okay, I got my gangs confused. I'm going to talk a little bit about him towards the end. Here's his orders and reports. And yeah, I'm going to save him till the next to last here. The dock workers, basically, the deal with the dock workers is trying to control the docks and so on. But again, all of these gangs, with the exception of the family of the 9 kings and the Infants Discure, were kind of a little flat in their characterization. That's directly related to the level of activity. But I do think that all the gangs were very well played. But I'm going to come back to Infants Discure. And I'm really excited to see that Pablo is on here. We're going to talk about him again momentarily, but he'll be on. Okay, let's see here. I think that kind of covers all the different groups. We talked about the communists, the elites old and new. That's the ones we need to talk about. The old elites was played by Claude Baudelaire, and his goal was really to just kind of, he's going around trying to bribe people. He was actually going, I think, behind Adid and trying to get in bed, I think, with the United States. I can't remember. Or the Russians. The old elites are supposed to be attached to the Russians. But again, a bit of a flat characterization. Time is an issue for some of our players. He played his position very well, however. The interesting, though, one was the new elites. And the new elites that really fascinated me was Willie McDonald starts off playing for his dad. He has his dad who's this old guy who is an old elite. And guess what? He starts off the game dying. He's actually shot while visiting one of the factories he owns in Port-au-Prince. And it's up to the police to investigate this and so on. And the thing is the police learn, well, he's kind of wounded, but he doesn't die from the gunshot. Yet he dies the next morning. So it's kind of assumed, well, he's an old guy. His body couldn't handle the stress of the injury. So his heart gave out. But the reality is he was poisoned by his own son. His son killed him. In fact, his son arranged for him to be shot to begin with. And the idea is his son wanted to take control of the empire. And then he wanted to get in bed with the United States and make a deal with the United States. I really appreciate how this player did. This was Stingray, and Stingray did really, really well. He couldn't be as active as I wanted him to be, but he was still pretty active. And Leon Tusk tries to court him and tries to kind of get a hold of the lithium through a back channel through McDonald, and it doesn't quite work out, but he tries. And he had set up a gangster to be caught, and the police actually did catch the gangster. When the police did their sweep on the gangs, they actually found the murder weapon, or the attempted murder weapon, I should say, the rifle, and the gangster who shot his father. That was actually intentional. He was supposed to be caught, but the police did not follow the lead. So unfortunately, this really cool kind of backstory drama that Willie McDonald had put together and orchestrated kind of fell flat. But by the time the police were in a position and knew, hey, we need to investigate this, Sam Miller was so caught up in his, crumbling control of the situation that he was forced to, or that he just kind of let it go. He wasn't forced; he just let it go. All right. So we've kind of gone through all of the players and everything and how I think they did. Let's talk about the winner. And there's a reason why I wanted Pablo on here, because he's the winner. He's a gangster. He's a winner. His gang wins. Now, let's talk about this. How do you win a Kriegspiel? You don't win a Kriegspiel by winning control or winning a battle per se. You win a Kriegspiel by making the best decisions with what you have. And what he did was really, really cool. First of all, he decides he's going to declare war on the police. He is tired of the police because the police arrested one of his gangsters. And he's like, I'm going to just declare war on the police. And what he does is absolutely critical to how the game unfolds. He has his gang get police uniforms. They dress up as policemen. And essentially, they frame Sam Miller, who is already on thin ice. And they go out and they do these kidnappings and shootings and other things. They start doing all this chaos. And at one point, they arrest the richest man on the island. They arrest, what did I call him? What was his name? But look at this.
Oh, yeah.
They're Joffrey Zabois. And if that looks like Jeff Bezos a little, it's a play on that, right? The founder of their version of Amazon, which is called the Parna, which is the second largest river aside from the Amazon in South America. But basically, they basically kidnap this guy while dressed in police uniforms, and they are filmed while doing it. And his plan is, we're going to kill this guy. We're going to demand ransom. They're going to pay the ransom, which they were going to pay the ransom, which is $20 million. Would have bought a lot of weapons. They made a deal with Lord Archangel to get the uniforms and the weapons and the bulletproof vests and everything that they needed. They sewed the names on. They had someone film the arrest from a distance. They did all of this stuff to create chaos. And I think this was a brilliant master stroke of play. Wow. This was the winning move. And the reason it was the winning move was not just because it was clever and smart and genius, but also it basically touched off. It was the final straw for President Adid. I think President Adid What happened when Jeffrey Zebois was kidnapped by the
Okay.
police? What went through your head?
I'm gonna tell you this immediately. You saw this in my chat. I don't read the news when it doesn't speak good about me. So I'm gonna tell you this immediately. I barely paid attention to the news, right? And I was just going on a roll by basically improvising. And I was, let's just say that I uh, I believe that the kidnapping, when I did learn about it, I was pretty, you could say, shocked. But honestly, it just further pushed my suspicions that Sam was plotting some very weird stuff. But I also believe that it wasn't smart, even for Sam, for him to just record it, because I don't think he would want to publicize such an event so early in the game. So I don't think it was him. And I definitely think he was being framed. So that was not why I went after him, to clarify that. I went after him because I believe that if I could eliminate him specifically him, I'd have full control over the national police. However, the big mistake was that I didn't really read the statement as good that the military sent me, which declared war on the police and not Sam Miller. So I was really flabbergasted there at the end.
Yeah, and I think Tunisgrad was the military player.
No, it was Wolfton.
Oh, it was Wolfton. I'm sorry, it was Wolfton. You're right, it was Wolfton. And Wolfton basically said, "All right, we're going to war with the police." What happened? Did you order him to go to war with the police, or what happened?
No.
Because
No.
he did was he issued an order that disbanded the police.
Yeah.
He told the police on the island, surrender.
Yeah.
You know?
What I think I misunderstood what he had sent me, and that's the unfortunate thing. Well, I guess you can blame it on the fact that Edith is old. So he needed reading glasses. He probably just didn't have them with him at the time. The problem was that I think I misunderstood what he was telling me. Otherwise, had I understood, I probably would have ordered him to... Hold on, just give me a second. I just saw Pablo's message. Yeah, because they didn't pay attention to any of my proposals. This guy single-handedly ended the game because the police weren't paying attention to him. This is the agent of chaos right here. This is the Joker. No, but like I was saying, I really misunderstood the statement that he gave me, and I think that had I understood, I probably would have changed things around. However, I believe that I personally believe that Sam had a use. He's not. He when you have him on your side, he tends to be the best player you can have, really, especially if you have control over him, because then what he does is, if you exercise that control over him, he'll do whatever you ask and he'll make sure it's completed. That's the difference between having him against you or having him with you, but you don't have control over him. And I think what I was going to do was I was going to basically negotiate with him. And I told him, look, if you surrender, I'm going to give you a fair trial. I was going to pardon Sam, and the rest of his officers were going to be allowed to return to their post. But Sam was going to be effectively exiled in a very quote-unquote sense. I was going to have him run my intelligence services because I needed somebody who could be assured to be in a position that he couldn't go against me apart from the military. Because if he had been with my intelligence services, these guys are getting paid by me, and I have the money to keep them on side, he probably wouldn't have been able to use them against me, as they are deathly loyal to me. They've been with me for since the military years, and they've been my most effective service on the island. So I was thinking that if I could use him on there, I could use his effectiveness and I could exercise control over him directly. And I think the problem was that Sam believed that I was going to have him killed if he surrendered, and I think he had a very big misunderstanding of what my intentions were. I had to have him killed, obviously, after he literally ordered a sniper to fire on me while I was ordering him to surrender. So I had to react there, and he was taken down as a result of that.
Yeah, let's talk about the siege of the headquarters real quick. The the event at the end of the game was there was a siege at the police headquarters, and basically Sam was holed up with about 30 other officers, which is quite a formidable force, a couple dozen at least. And he had a police sniper, his best police sniper, take a shot at you. Unfortunately, at that time, the military had completely surrounded the building. So for the sniper to come up and take a shot, he has to expose himself in a window that's being watched by a soldier and take the shot. Nonetheless, he's a really good sniper. So the way I did it was I arranged the roll of the dice, and I think on a 1 to 5 is a d20. On a 1 to 5, he would completely miss. On a 5 to 10 or a 6 to 10, he would hit you, but you would only be lightly wounded. On an 11 through 15, you would be seriously wounded and incapacitated. And on a 16 to 20, you're dead. And I rolled the die, and it was a 6. So that's a light wound.
Wow.
It's the lightest possible wound. So basically, you get a scratch. The military catches him pop up in the window. They light up the window. They're not sure if they hit him or not. They didn't. He got away without being harmed. But he didn't kill you. He didn't even incapacitate you. He gave you just this light scratch. And so you, of course, get up. You know, your bodyguards rush, and they hide you behind an armored vehicle to protect you. And you're like, no, get off me. I'm fine. And you've got this blood coming down your shoulder. And they're like, well, let us give you first aid. And he's like, and you're like, no, let everybody see me bleed. And you get up there and you stand in the same spot where you were shot, showing extraordinary courage, and you give this speech, and then you give the order to assault the building. Now, the military was wanting to blow up the building. The orders from the military were have the tanks just destroy it, just level it, just fire on it. But no, why didn't you blow up the headquarters?
Okay, so something that came up in my head was during the siege was that I had personal suspicions that Sam was actually corrupt and he was making these deals with the gangs. I believe that he contained some of that information about what he was doing with them inside the headquarters. So I thought that maybe if I managed to prove to the people with direct evidence that he was making deals with the gangs and effectively causing the crime on the island, I would be able to sway them back to my side and justify my decision as a way to reestablish peace on the island. Whatever, some dumb propaganda, really. And it worked out in my favor. By the way, just something. Why did you say unfortunately? Do you not root for your president? I am the president, by the way. You said unfortunately he didn't get me. That's very anti-Edid. You know what? I think I might have to send my intelligence services after you.
Oh, I'm in trouble now. I'm going to have to seek asylum. So there we have it. But he didn't make the roll, and I'll just leave it at that. Before we wrap this up, I want to talk about the United States and Russia, and then I'm going to talk about who I think is the second and third place. The United States and Russia had this really cool interaction. The Russians actually called for Wagner mercenaries and some armored vehicles and some fighter planes to be transported from Russia all the way into IDL. And they were going to be on hand to use at a moment's notice. But on the way in, the United States is also drawing a cordon around the island. So the American president, President Gray, is like, look, this stuff is getting out of hand down there. The domestic situation is becoming unstable. The military general has just disbanded the police department, just ordered all the police across the island to surrender. Well, of course, what happens on a place like this where you don't have a police force anymore? It goes nuts. And so there's basically 3 days to the end of the game where there's just chaos and looting and rioting and things are on fire, and it just goes to anarchy quickly because the military general disbanded the police without having his army in place to take over those situations.
Yeah.
The president declares martial law and a curfew, but the army is much too small. It's not as big as the police force. It's better equipped. It's loyal. It's capable, but it doesn't have the numbers. So the island just goes into collapse.
Yeah.
This is where Zindos, President Adid, puts himself in third place, in my opinion. And the reason you're getting third place is you let this happen without immediately correcting it and without having another solution in place. I think, however, I want to come to your defense, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, and I don't want to get personal, but I think you had a schedule conflict and you were not able to give your full attention to the game for a day or two when a lot of this stuff started to come down.
This is true because
so it's a little unfair to you. I'll say that.
However, here's what I'll say. During the end days of the game, when I got that proposal and the statement from the military guy, I was getting ready to leave France, right? And I was trying to spend time a lot with my dad. So I didn't
in real life. We're just saying that, this is real life. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
And I didn't get as much time to pay attention, and I thought that this wasn't. I didn't think this was going to be the last days of the game. So I said, okay, go ahead, my man. You got free reign, and that's that. Yeah, exactly. Oops. I think that I do think I could have done far better because I know that I had the mind to get this done. Because listen, during the end days of the game, actually during the start, I was organizing these tours of the country, right?
Which, by the way, is part of the reason why you're placing it all. You did this tour to the north and a tour to the south to kind of see the people and talk to the farmers. I think that was a brilliant move. That was a good move in your part. Man of the people. I liked it.
Yeah, especially because I believe that since Marshall especially encouraged RP, I think that it was an in-character move for the guy who effectively established a dictatorship and had a lot of the people's love, and they kept giving him chances for a reason. So I think that it was important to justify why they were on side for most of the time. I think establishing him as this kind of charismatic guy who was able to sway the people to his side was certainly a realistic kind of characterization of him. However, I was unfortunate that it didn't do as much as I would have hoped, because had the intended effect gone, I think that there wouldn't have been as much people looting purely out of and I wouldn't say respect, but rather duty to the country.
No, you're wrong in that. They would have looted.
Oh, okay.
They were going to loot.
Yeah, that's no fair. Problem. Okay.
Yeah, they're going to loot. But aside from that, I do think that you made a good call there. I'll give you one more word, and then I got to talk about United States and Russia here.
Yeah, I do have to ask you, what would have happened if I had gone out to the crowd?
At what point? When they were rioting?
No, while the military was surrounding the
and I think your guys were like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
You would have had a die roll for your death. Somebody might have tried to attack you or hurt you or kill you. Yeah, it was.
So I made the right choice listening.
You made the right choice. Yeah, I was like, no, don't do this. I'll let you do it, but I'm telling you probably don't want to. And that's just because I didn't want to have to roll a d20 on you and see what happened to you. Because if you had died and got assassinated,
this would have been
everything would have been. Yeah, then I think the game would have just been beginning.
I think that if Adid had died, the United States would have been the winners. Sure. They were exploiting everything.
The communists did really, really well. And the communists had a couple of decision points, but the big one was, do they tell the truth to the Chinese or not? They made the right call there. And then there was one other thing about them, and I'm forgetting what it is now. But I'm trying to think of it, but I'm going to lose it. But anyway, I don't want to bog down in that. But I think had the game turned into chaos, the communists would have emerged as the strong factor, especially with Chinese support, depending on what Russia and the United States tried to do. Now let's talk briefly about Russia and the United States. The United States is like, we've got people on the ground here. We have an embassy of personnel. The embassy staff are feeling threatened. We know that there's drugs and human trafficking and other things going on. We know that the Russians are up to some kind of shenanigans there. There's obviously a strategic resource. Everybody's probably trying to get a hold of it, and it's creating problems. So you know what? No, we're going to put a stop to this. So this is why I think Eli is definitely in second place here, because he sends the Fourth Fleet down there. He sends Marines, and he is ready to move in if he has to. And he actually had an operational plan drawn up for a Marine invasion of the island had it become necessary. And he sends in the Marines to extract the people on the embassy by helicopter, which is successful. You know, I'm looking for the United States here. And he sends in the fleet. And as it turns out, he's got, let's see here. Is it in here? No, I'm trying to see where it is. He's got, here's his invasion. So he actually had an invasion location selected. But ultimately, he finds out that there is a Russian submarine in the area. And now this becomes really serious because there's a Russian submarine somewhere about 100 miles off the coast to the north. And that Russian submarine is doing what? And what had happened was the Russian ambassador had offered a submarine to IDL, to President Adid. Now, President Adid had not accepted the offer, and it was going to be a Kilo-class submarine. But the Russian Navy actually had a submarine, an attack submarine in the Caribbean that was kind of inching its way towards the island to just kind of be present and on hand and to just be there if needed. The ambassador did not know about this. The Russian ambassador didn't know about it. So when the Americans detect a Russian submarine, they're like, wait a minute, what's going on? They had heard that the Russians were possibly offering a submarine to IDL. So they're like, you're going to give them these military assets, a submarine of all things? And of course, when the Americans announce, they even present evidence to the UN. Hey, because the UN's having this meeting about peacekeepers, where everybody actually unanimously rejects the idea of peacekeepers, which were all independent votes. That was what I was going to say about the communists. I asked the communist player, what was his position on the peacekeepers? How should China vote? And he says, yes, let's have the peacekeepers in. Because if the island tears itself apart, what's left? He's actually wrong. This was an error on the part of TS-14, of the communists. He should have said no to the peacekeepers, because if the island's in a state of chaos, it's much easier then to gain your goal, which is ultimately an armed communist uprising and taking control of the island. That can't happen if the island's stable or peacekeepers are present. But it can happen if there's instability and weapons can be freely brought in and the people are desperate and they're looking for a cause to get behind and someone to protect them. Then he has a wide open road. So that was one error that he made. But of course, he didn't have an actual vote. It did sway the Chinese, of course, or ultimately the Chinese were like, no, we're going to vote against it. But it was part of the Chinese calculus to make the determination. But the United States and China realized, hey, there's a submarine down here. And the Russian submarine learns that the Americans are tailing them precisely because the Americans released the evidence at the UN. So once the evidence is presented at the UN, they warn their submarine when it comes up for, to check messages. Hey, we got something going on here, and we need you to be ready to defend yourself. And so the submarine does an active sonar ping. And the goal of that is to kind of take up the tension, the military tension, to the next level. And I want to see what Eli does. Now, Eli holds fire. He doesn't give instructions to fire. It's fire only if fired upon. And then I go to the Russian ambassador, who's played by Desert Fox. And I ask Desert Fox, hey, the Americans like right on top of you. What do you want to do? Now, Desert Fox has a call to make. He can either basically just light that match and get going, get crazy with it, or he can basically tuck his tail between his legs and retire. And he gives the latter order. He tells the submarine, hey, slink away, go into Havana and port there for the duration of the conflict, which was exactly the correct move. Now, as he's doing this, he actually has an IL-76 that's coming in. The Fourth Fleet locates it. The IL-76 realizes it's being detected by the Fourth Fleet and diverts to Cuba. And it's got the Wagner mercenaries, some armored vehicles, and it's got 4 trainer pilots, instructor pilots. There were supposed to be 4 planes that were going to be delivered, but the planes can't be delivered in 24 hours. They have to actually be disassembled, shipped over by boat in crates, shipped by a ship, and then reassembled, and then the pilots trained and so on. So they actually make a deal with Cuba for 4 old MiG-21s, and they give their instructor pilots a day of training, a kind of a crash course. Here's how to fly the MiG-21. These are instructor pilots, so they're fairly competent. So Russia has some power. They've got some aircraft. They've got 4 aircraft on Cuba. There's 4 IDL aircraft that are operational in IDL. And then, of course, there's the mercenaries and the army and other things. So Russia's like, do we spring this? Do we move in? What do we do? But wisely, they hold off. I think Eli and the Russian ambassador essentially tie in a way because both of them had some very delicate decisions to make. They had to set aside pride. They had to set aside personal preferences and agendas, and they correctly did so. So rather than stirring the pot and making things worse, even though they both had the ability to bring the hammer down and get crazy, they wisely allowed cooler minds to prevail. And ultimately, they did. So, as it's being said, Jason says, would be cool to see this game run for several more months of game time. And I agree. I agree. And I would like to see someone else pick up the game. I'd like to get involved in it and play it, actually. I don't have the time and the bandwidth to do it, and I'm going to get to you in just a second, Zindos. But TS14 says, surprise naval simulator ending, and he's actually correct. But ultimately, I want to say that the winner is the Infants to Skewer. It's Pablo is the winner by far, bar none. He's the winner. I want to say that the United States and Russia are in there for second place. I want to say the communists are in there for like third place along with the deed. So these are the 5 players I think did exceptionally well in the game. The military blundered. Adid is responsible for that blunder to some degree, which is they blundered in that they disbanded the police force without having a safety net. But I'm not holding that against you, Adid, because I know that real life kind of was there. And it would be unfair to hold that against you. But otherwise, that was the end of the game. Those are your winners and your losers. And I was pretty proud of how everyone did for the most part. It was certainly a fun game. What did you want to say? Go ahead.
Yeah, so you were saying that you'd love to see somebody pick this up. And I actually may be willing to do this by June, as I will be finishing up school. So I may be ready to do this, of course, with the right guidance. And I'd love to see you take up my role as a deed and see what you do.
I would love that challenge. Yeah, maybe see if 1 or 2 other players or people want, especially somebody who played, see if they want to assist umpire, because then they would know the situation.
Yeah,
the server should be open for everybody to go through it. and look at all the channels. So there's also all of the private meeting channels here on the left.
You do need to invite people because you restricted the invitation to those who applied in the registration.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So we can do that. I don't know. I guess I have to put another invitation out. I've given you guys all admin permissions, actually, so I think you can post an invite as well. So I think because I was going through trying to figure how to give people access, and I think the way to do it was just make everybody an admin and say forget it.
Yeah.
At first, I was trying to be all fancy about it. Nah, just open it up. I didn't want people to delete anything, and I'm like, why would anyone delete anything? They're not going to delete anything. Just give them all admin. So there you are. All right. Well, that's it. That is my ruling. Pablo 6, you are the winner of the campaign, and that is my ruling as the judge. All right.
You're fired.
Court is adjourned. Yeah, now I'm fired. Now I have to go seek asylum because I said the word unfortunately. So what do you do then? All right, everybody. Well, I want to thank you all for tuning into this special episode of Coffee Kegs and Kriegspiel. I hope that it was a good time for you. It was a great time for me. I really enjoyed running the event, and we'll see if it resumes in the months to come. Hopefully it does, but if not, it was still a great time. Zindos, thank you for being here, Mr. President, and we will see you all on our next adventure.
Please stop spreading American propaganda.
Absolutely. There's your closing words. Thank you all, and we'll see you on our next adventure. Goodbye for now.
See you guys.